welcome to the Improv. Someone as always, I'm your host Spencer, and with me today I have a very special guest. I always say I have a special guest, but to change it up, I take the person's first letter of their first name and put an adjective in front of it because it makes it a unique element for this show. And today I have with me Jumping Janson.
Wow. I mean, you just said it right there. That's if there's one adjective that begins with the J that describes me, it's jumping.
If there's one
That
adjective
was
with this J that
amazing.
describes you, it's the
How do
verb
you do that?
jumping.
Can we spend the next hour dissecting how you came up with that? Oh man, that's just perfection. Mwah.
Look, I also realize that when I say
I'll give you
adjective, I
this.
mean verb.
J's are hard words. So like,
I was gonna
think
say
of a word that
like
begins with the letter J and your mind goes blank.
I think I did it once with another J name. It was Jumpin' Jehoshaphat because I had no idea what to go with, and I just said jumping. So I really just kind of only am going to use jumping from now on for any J
Uh,
names.
I'm
Uh,
impressed you were interviewing someone whose name was Jehoshaphat. That's fascinating. You don't often see that name.
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. It was. Yeah. I don't even remember. Anyways, all right. Let's just dive in, Jansen. Let's talk about improv, shall we? Let's talk about you
Let's.
and your background in improv. What is your improv experience?
My improv experience, I was a big fan of improv starting in high school. I created a small improv group with some friends that was basically doing Whose Line Is It Anyway games at different small events. Um, I was born and raised in Connecticut, so I was an hour train ride away from New York City. So, especially in college, I would often take a train in to go see Upright Citizens Brigade shows like ASCAT, like getting to see the core four who created Upright Citizens Brigade, like doing shows in their prime. It was like
Hmm.
right when the Upright Citizens Brigade show was on Comedy Central, which I loved. So getting to see them was really cool. Um, and I did a little improv in college. It really wasn't until I moved to Florida after college to work in Walt Disney World. I spent about 7 years doing all kinds of different jobs there, but I was always going to the auditions for the equity roles, specifically wanting to get, like, my dream job was the Citizens of Hollywood, which was a
Mm-hmm.
1940s street sphere improv group at the Disney's Hollywood Studios Park. I would get called back sometimes, but never get the actual role. I never got cast in any of the shows. And it wasn't until my seventh year there, I was kind of burned out and I was like, you know what, this is the last audition I'm going to go to for a while. I don't even care anymore. And so I don't know if it was because I had that mentality going into that audition, because I was usually nervous when I went to the auditions and it showed. But this one, clearly I didn't care anymore. And 2 weeks later, I got a call and they told me I was cast. So of
There
course
you
it's the
go.
one thing where you're like, once you stop caring and once you stop wanting it, they're like, "Ooh, well, we see that you don't want it anymore, so now we want you."
Yeah,
It's
that
always the thing.
happened to me when we were just actually talking off camera about show I auditioned for 3 times, got called back, never made it, and then the last time I was like, I'm over auditioning for this. I'll just go one more time. I really don't care, and then I got on, and I was
Yeah.
like, really, when I don't care is when you want me to care. Okay, got it. Great. Yeah, but let's talk a little bit more about you and why you've done so much improv, or how you've used improv. What do you love about improv?
Uh, I mean, I love the chaos of it. Like it causes you to think on your feet in a way you've never done before. Um, I in the past have had, and this is something I've had to work at, a really hard time listening to other people when I'm in a scene, because I like you're always thinking like, oh, what's the next funny thing I'm gonna say? And it took me a while to get out of that mindset and just organically, listen to what a person was saying to me and respond in the moment of whatever the character was. And it took me a while to realize that that's oftentimes when the funniest moments occur. Not like what's the very best line to say in this moment, but what's something that's like honest and organic, and maybe sometimes isn't going to be the funniest thing, but is going to make for, it was really going to set up a funny moment 30 seconds from now. Like
Mm,
how can you constantly just make your scene ring true and figure out in a moment how can I set the other person up, because they're going to be doing
mm.
the same for me, and it's just because you just kind of build from there.
Sure, I think that's great. It actually kind of makes me think of so like just kind of continuing to do improv and building from there. I know that you are involved in the immersive world when it comes to like immersive performances. I've seen you do some shows. We've done some shows together, and I just want to kind of touch a little bit on using improv in an immersive setting because a lot of immersive shows, at least that I've seen or that I know of, have generally a script or like a structure to it, but the majority is heavily reliant on audience interaction because audiences are coming in, it's immersive because they're able to talk with the performers or change the way in which the story is unfolding. And so, in terms of improv meets immersive, where do you find that immersive is very beneficial for immersive? I know we kind of touched on it with the building on each other, but when it comes to interacting with audiences and interacting with fellow performers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about immersive is it's such a broad spectrum word. Like
Sure
immersive,
is.
it's like, yeah, it's like it runs such a large gambit that immersive can be, um, just getting to interact with some boxes before a show starts, all the way to, like Dungeons and Dragons, or, world building, Renaissance fair stuff where people can like become a character and, walk around and interact. Uh, y- y- I find it really helps when you're creating immersive that does lean more towards like being able to stay in a character and like interact with audience members who might be like trying to solve a murder mystery where you're one of the suspects and they're going to ask you a question that you're not prepared for, or they someone walks up to you and you're in character, and they ask you a question and you have to be able to figure, you don't have a scripted response for it. uh
Hmm.
I've definitely found that like workshopping as much as possible with the actors, like who their characters are, and like just being able to prepare them to answer any question that comes their way. Usually through those workshops, people start to realize, okay, this is who my character is, this is their backstory, this is how they would respond in any given scenario. The longer you work on things like that, the the better they're prepared, so that when someone asks them a question, they don't have to think, oh, okay, how would my character respond to this? They can just immediately say something in character, that they don't have to think ahead of time, oh, what's the best thing to say. It just comes out.
Mm. And I love that idea with like creating the character and building that world because in theory, if someone's creating a character, they can change that character as long as it sticks with the general through line of the story. That character can have a different response if it doesn't necessarily, like for instance, a murder mystery example. If that response has nothing really to do with the through line of the story or changes like who the murderer is, then like that you can kind of change that character up based on whatever, like if the audience is like super into like musical theater, you can make that character like more of a musical theater, something that fits in the musical theater world while still maintaining that overall story of the character and the world that you're in. That was a terrible example, but you get the idea. But
No, no, no.
I think that's a great point of like someone who's creating their own character is very much like in an improv scene. Literally creating, you're creating from even less almost. You're creating from simply a suggestion or based on what someone else has done in a scene, and you're just coming in and doing a whole thing, creating a character, creating the world within that moment. And I think that that's also something where with immersive, and I guess specifically more like immersive theater or like immersive events, you have your fellow performers that you're dealing with, but also the audience. And I think that also is a way in improv, like an audience giving a suggestion. They're not part of the show, and you're like, okay, now you don't say anything else for the rest of the show. But taking that suggestion that they've offered and turning it into something where they can feel like they're a part of the show because you're like, oh, that was like my suggestion. Oh wow, like even if you don't do it exactly like A to B it, if you take that A to C, they can still understand that like if someone said the suggestion was, I don't know, jockey, and then all of a sudden you're a horsefly. Like they get the idea where that came from because you A to C it versus A to B. But yeah, so I think that like immersive was just something that I know that we both have some experience in with immersive, and it feels like improv can really help guide immersive in its own way, but also which leads me into the idea of using improv in your everyday life. There's elements of immersive like audience interaction, public speaking, same thing with improv, but are there any things that you feel like you've learned from improv that have helped you build in your everyday life, like outside of performance?
I mean, definitely, and I don't know if this is really improv that's helped it, but definitely I would say like working for working in a theme park, you find yourself having to kind of be like on all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
you naturally get better at just being able to like come up with an answer in the moment for something that you may not have the answer to, and just being able to, to figure out like, okay, who am I talking to? What do they need? Like what, like here are the all the different ways I can give them the answer. What's
Mm-hmm.
going to be, something that's interesting. What are they looking for, and how can I, in this moment, give them what they need? Going back also to like you know, in scenes for improv, someone can ask you a question and you can have an answer prepared for them, but there's so many different ways your character might be feeling in that moment. You might be annoyed
Mm-hmm.
by something and you don't feel like giving them the answer. You might be sarcastic. You might be hungry and like, not even like really paying attention to what they're saying. There's a lot of fun ways you can answer a question and not just give information, you
Mm.
know.
Yeah, it's a lot of. I mean, that even involves like when like I teach actors like improv and acting, and I teach actors acting. Wow, and
You do.
what a shocker! That's what happens. But a lot of times with slates, we always talk about when you have a slate. If someone asks you like a yes or no question, like do you like spaghetti? They're not looking for you to literally go yes. They want you to go yes because, or yes, and the reason I like spaghetti is because they want to hear from your perspective why you like or don't like spaghetti. So I think
Right.
that it kind of goes back to that as well. And also with the theme park thing as well, I think this is, as someone who also works at a theme park, giving tours and having four different audiences literally every day. I have done jokes that have really landed. I've done the same jokes that have landed very poorly, did not land at all. And I also have times where I've improvised jokes. Like I remember one time, I'm just thinking about it. We were coming out of Earthquake, and I said, "Give it up for Earthquake, everyone!" And the entire audience, and I said, "That's an 8.3 on the Richter scale. Give yourselves another round of applause for surviving that earthquake." And the audience, like, just the guests, just like went wild and like screamed in applause. And I was like, "Ooh, that was an 8.3 on the Richter scale of applause!" And I got a big laugh. And then the next time it happened, I had like a big response. I did it. I tried it again. I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna do it," and then it didn't land because in that moment I had improvised that little joke, and it worked so well because it was in the moment versus me trying to force it into another tour. It didn't work. And so I think that that's one of the biggest things with like improv, immersive theater, improv is knowing one that things will not always land, and it is okay because you can just make something land the next time, and that's like totally fine. And it's just like kind of bouncing back from it. Like if it doesn't work, okay, whatever. No one's gonna like remember. No, I don't think I've ever remembered an improv show that I've done like ever because I just forget things. I forget things in the middle of a Herald. Like someone's like bringing me back to as a character, and I'm like, what did I do on the first beat? I don't even remember. Like I am very bad at remembering in the moment. I'm so focused on everything else that I just forget what just happened.
Well, I can't remember what the phrase is where you're like I'm a glutton for punishment.
Mm-hmm.
In that, like, I love nothing more than a scene getting like such a silent response that it creates its own comedy from the response of whatever's happening. Like, I love I don't. It's and I think it's a defense mechanism because I used to take it really personally, and I used to like if there was a scene that just wasn't hitting, and I would go off stage and be like pissed off at myself. It took me a while to just embrace the chaos of like when things are just clearly not working at all. Like the silence. I live in the silence, and I love it. And
Mm-hmm.
like especially like if an audience isn't going with something I'm doing, I take it to. I just keep going in that direction. It's like, you don't like that? Well, okay, well then I'm gonna give you seconds and thirds. Bring it
Uh-huh.
on.
Yeah, I've had that too where I had one time I did a joke at Jaws. My whole tour was looking at Jaws, and then they literally turned to me and they all groaned in unison at how dad jokey it was. And then went back to look at the tour, look at Jaws, and I literally just got on the mic and I said, "Thank you. I'll be here for the rest of the tour. There's more where that's coming from." And then that got a laugh too, but it doesn't always work. And so it's a way of figuring out how the audience flow is going to work too, and that's adding on to that improv as well as knowing what's working for your audience and what's not. And if you get a groan, you know that like they're like, "Oh, come on." It's like, "Oh yeah, you want more of those. I know you do." Versus like, "Ooh, don't ever do that again."
Yeah,
Um,
working on the Jungle Cruise, I definitely got my fair share of groans, and you're like,
sure.
it's working.
I quite enjoy that ride a lot because of the puns and the groans. It makes me laugh when people groan on things. But that being said, Jansen, now's a good time if you have any plugs or any pitches, anything you want to promote, anything at all. Now's a good time to just throw that out into the ether. It'll also be linked down in the description below.
Boy, nothing coming up on the pipeline. I might do something with the Hollywood Fringe Festival this year, so if I do, stay tuned, and I'll
Yeah, come
announce
back
that on my
here.
socials. Yeah.
Come back here in June of 2022 and look and see if the description has changed.
Who knows?
Well, do you want to share your socials? Do you want to throw any of your socials out?
Sure. I'm, I'm Janson L at Janson L on Twitter. I don't post on Twitter very much. I'm the only Janson Lalich on Facebook. I'm one of few Jansons at all, so it's not hard to find me. And then you can go to my website, jansonlalich.com for my portfolio of writing.
Great. That was a great pitch. We'll put that all in the description down there. So all I gotta do is do a
Yes.
click. Just do a little click. Jansen, thanks so much for joining me here on the Improv Summit. I have one final question for you, and it's the reason why the Improv Summit exists. And that reason is like, I had a lot of improv classes, a lot of acting classes, and I had people always come up to me, Spencer, you take a lot of improv. Where should I take improv? And always in that voice. And I always have a hard time answering that question because I feel like that's such a vague question, and there's so much to improv. So if someone came up to you and said, "Well, you take a lot of improv. Where should I take improv?" What would be one piece of advice or one tip you'd give them to help guide them on their improv journey?
I mean, if you live in areas like Los Angeles or New York, the Upright Citizens Brigade, I think, is a good place to start. You know, Second City and Groundlings are good for character work, like sketch comedy, things like that. Upright Citizens Brigade is good for improv. They both do both. You'll just learn more from one and less, you know, if you know what I mean. Um, so if you're in those areas, take those classes. You might not find exactly what you're looking for, but the purpose of those classes is to, I think, get out of your skin and like really kind of expand. And you're going to make the connections you make, I think, with those classes are going to be most important because you're going to find other talented people like yourselves, and you're going to find the people that you mesh with, and you'll be able to take those relationships and kind of you have to take the next step of going, okay, this class is now over. I'm not just going to sit back and wait for something to happen. I have to now take what I learned from this class and start something of my own. Maybe it's a one-person show, or maybe it's a show with a bunch of other people where we're just getting together once a week and doing something for no audience, just for ourselves because
Mm.
we enjoy it. I would suggest uh, purchasing the book, and I'm going to look it up right now. Upright Citizens Brigade has a book
Oh, you're talking about the
on improv.
manual?
Yes.
Oh yeah, they used
So
to be manual. Very,
Yeah,
I will say it is a long book and it is very heady, so
it
just keep that in
is.
mind. It is very dense, but it
It's
has a lot of
definitely,
information.
yeah, it's almost like I mean, like you said, it's a manual, so you can read it straight through, especially if you know zero about improv. It's good to like, they talk a lot about the basics, which is
Hmm.
great if you know nothing. But it's also good to just be like, boy, I'm having this one part of my improv I feel like I'm lacking and I need to work on. What am I not getting? You can kind of look it up in the
Yeah,
manual and
you
find
can
what they
compartmentalize
say.
it.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll be like 3 pages of and you'll also, oh, okay, I think I understand what they're saying now.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's great. I didn't even think about suggesting books. Also, How to Be the Greatest Improviser on Earth by Will Hines is also a wonderful book. Uh,
Yeah.
a lot less dense, but also it's a completely different style of book. So it really depends on what how your brain processes and what you want to do. But I do agree that the manual, as dense as it is, I read it on an airplane, so maybe that that was my problem. Um, as dense as it is packed with information, and it is very good to like I can just pull a chapter or pull a section and just read that if I want to touch up on this element or this thing or whatever it is. So I think that's great. Anyways, thanks, Jansen, so much for joining me here on the Improv Summit. I did say that was the last question for you, but as always on this show, I just like to pull Paul Giamatti, a little bit of a big fat liar, am I? And I do have another question for you. One other question for you. We've been talking a lot about improv. You want to do some improv?
Hell no. Oh, yes, I do.
Great. And that's a great example of yes anding or
No and
no butting.
goodbye.
Which one is the real one? Drop down in the comments which one you think you should do. Yes and or no but. We'll find out. All right, let's do some improv. All right, we're going to do some improv. Jansen, what I need from you is an answer to this question. Do you want a location, a relationship, or a word?
Word.
I'm going to give you two. You tell me which one you want to go with. The suggestions are record or record because there's no, tilde anywhere.
There's no
Uh,
umlaut.
umlaut, yeah. No emphasis at all of anywhere. So record or subtraction.
Subtraction.
That's what I'm going to go with. All right, subtraction. And who would you like to initiate this scene?
I'm gonna hand it off to you.
All right, great. Thank you. Subtraction. Thank you.
No, no, no. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, here we go. I just feel like okay, I got the perfect dish. If I take the broccoli out and put in a little bit more carrot, I think that'll give it a nice little extra texture, a little extra flavor, and make the perfect pumpkin ravioli.
You- I don't know how to explain this to you again. You can't just take out an ingredient of a recipe and put something else in just because you have it, especially if it doesn't match, if it's not even in the same family. That's not going to make what you're looking for. It's going to make uh, bad food.
I get it. You want to stick with the green, so why don't we just take out the spinach and put in some Brussels sprouts? I feel like that's a fair trade off because they're both green.
Oh my God, what are you? You cannot. I asked you to go to the store. I asked you to get a list of things. You said okay. You came home with nothing and you're doing this again.
What? What am I doing?
You're pretending like you didn't screw up, which is
I
kind of technically a form of gaslighting. You are gaslighting me by pretending that this is going to be fun.
well, I didn't. I just sincerely think maybe changing up the recipes is what is called for in this new day
You
and age.
don't think you're only saying that because you don't have the ingredients and you're trying to save face. Just
Um,
admit that you screwed up.
well, when you accidentally
Just
put,
admit that you screwed up.
but when Marie Antoinette had cake and ate it too, or she let them eat cake, you know the idea. You get the idea. Cake, when you put it together, it's just a whole cake.
Well, now you've got me hungry for cake. Do we have the ingredients to make cake?
Well, if I take out the Brussels sprouts of the ravioli and then I put in a little bit more flour, it could be like a flour ravioli cake. It just tastes like ravioli, but it'll look like cake.
So now you're suggesting making a cake out of ravioli,
Yes.
because that sounds amazing.
See?
Let's do it.
Thanks everybody so much for coming to the Improv Summit. I'm still getting used to this new logo. I'm Spencer. That's Janson. See you next time. Bye.